And joining us now is our legal analyst, Ian Friedman, who is a defense attorney, but joining us kind of with his prosecutorial hat on today. Ian, thanks a lot.
Yeah, sure.
You heard Tom's report. If you're defending this officer, what in that document concerns you most?
I think that really what we all had already seen, you know, the quick approach of the car, just how fast everything happened, and then ultimately a 12-year-old boy is laying there on the ground dying. I mean, no fact finder is going to want to have to see that and make a decision on that.
But a grand jury is going to have to make a decision on this. Is there enough in here to indict him? Would you expect him to be indicted?
Yeah, look, Prosecutor McGinty's website, he issued a statement in correlation to this report and says it is going to the grand jury. The grand jury's function is to determine whether or not there's probable cause. It's a very low standard, you know, much lower than the standard beyond a reasonable doubt, which we see on TV and in the courtrooms. The defense is not there. No one is arguing against the presentation of the state's material, so I would expect an indictment.
A lot of people may be confused because they heard this story late this week in Judge Adrian's court that said this judge said there's enough to indict, and now we have this piece of paper that then goes to a grand jury. It all comes into the same funnel, right? The grand jury ostensibly decides both of these things.
Both tracks, separate as they are now, will come together. Both of them have to go to a grand jury. The grand jury's separate function is to determine only if there's probable cause, and then it goes into the courts.
Let me ask you a little bit about the timing of this and the mechanics of it, because so much has been made of the dispatcher never relayed to these officers that the reports were it looked like a juvenile, that it looked like it was a toy gun. They didn't have that information. Is that relevant when it comes to getting a charge or an indictment and getting a conviction?
Yeah, I think it's highly relevant to whether or not the state can get a conviction. If I'm the defense lawyer, I'm going to say, look, you know, the officer's put in an absolutely impossible position. He gets a call that an individual has a gun. We get there, and the individual reaches with both hands for the firearm. It is reasonable for that officer then to fear for his safety and take action like he did there. The question, you know, now that we know it's a 12-year-old, is it relevant? I don't think so, because we hear every day about 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds pulling a trigger. A child can pull a trigger, and all reports leading up to that call were that this could have been an adult, and even first responders thought that this was a teenager large size.
Final question. Part of the narrative we learned today was this is a teenager who got picked on a little bit by how he looked, by how he dressed. The gun was supposed to make him look more intimidating with his friends. Does this sort of narrative play into the emotional side, potentially, of grand juries? This was a kid who was bullied, or is that completely irrelevant right now?
Well, look, human beings are in the grand jury, and they're going to hear it. And I will tell you that when I read it, it was sad. I mean, you read it and you learned that he was still alive when the FBI agent came to start administering first aid.
Reached for the agent's hand.
Yeah, you heard his words, and he said, "I'm shot," and he put out his hand and he wanted his gun. So, of course, this is going to be very trying on anyone on any side of the aisle. If it doesn't affect you, something's wrong. This was a sad situation on all parts, but does it reach to the level of violating an Ohio crime on the parts of the officers? I think it's going to be very, very difficult to prove in a court of law.
And it still could be weeks or months until we find out what that grand jury does. Okay,
Absolutely.
Ian, thanks as always.
Sure. Always good to be here.
Appreciate it.